to know where to go and get the right answer, or at least, steer that person in the right direction, depending on what they need to do and where they need to go.
Yeah, I think another part of that is, like you said, you don't always have the answers, but you're there as somebody to listen. You're a sounding board. Sometimes that's the most valuable thing, is for somebody to have someone to talk to. And most of the time, if you just sit back and listen, they'll talk it out, and they'll hear themselves, and they're like, oh, yeah, now I've got it solved. Boom. Okay, move on. You don't have to have the answer because they've got it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, but that sounding board, just being available to somebody or having somebody that you can go to can make a huge difference.
And I think you have to have a genuine interest in the person you're mentoring, not for any type of personal gain, but just because you know that this person is trying to do the right thing, they want to do the right thing, you see the potential of where this person can go, and just, you just want to help that person, because somewhere along the line someone has always helped us. And just to pass that knowledge down from what you received from someone down to someone else who is deserving of it, that's a lot of times that's rewarding in itself.
I'd comment on that in that that relationship is not just a business relationship. Even when you might enter into that relationship as a business relationship, it's going to turn into something more than that every time, because your personality, especially as an artist, is a big part of what you do. And as a mentor, it's going to, the things that you're saying, the things that you're suggesting, or even the way that you're listening can affect the apprentice for sure. And beyond that, you guys both mentioned that the apprentice-mentor relationship was maybe the terminology wasn't used as much in the recent past, or maybe even that those opportunities weren't as readily available for everybody. I've always felt, especially all through college, that was the best way to learn. Because I thought about, in printmaking, some of the old masters were starting as an apprentice to somebody at the age of 8 years old. And they would be trained by the master, by somebody who is so accomplished in their field that they have truly mastered something. And I mean, that I always had thought of that as man, that's the way, but I can't find it. It doesn't exist. Does it exist anymore? And it was always that question, is that around? Did people take on an apprentice and apprentice them for years and years and, build that up? And I've found that in some cases it does happen, but it's almost always tied to some kind of personal relationship, or it becomes a personal relationship through that process. And at least in Atlanta, I've definitely seen more of those opportunities popping up. There's something called Leap Year through a Mint Gallery that is they take on 3 artists, give them a stipend, give them a studio, and allow them access to multiple mentors to guide them and help them. And it's an incredible program. I applied for it this year and I didn't quite make it, but who knows? You keep applying and eventually it works out. As well as the program that I was involved in, which was the MoCA GA Working Artist Program, that takes on 3 working artists and allows them to have paid apprentices work for them. And those are limited time programs, so they don't they're not going to last for years, but the relationship can last for years. And I found that through doing that, I've developed a relationship with this artist to where we openly communicate readily now, even though the program has ended. He's hired me back for many other things. I've worked for his friends. I've worked with him on projects outside of that. And that's where I feel like the most beneficial mentor-apprentice relationship should eventually turn into, in some cases, not always. Maybe sometimes you need mentoring for a specific thing or for just a specific period of time, and you've got what you need to move on. But especially for someone coming out of college and trying to figure out what to do with your degree and with your massive student loan debt, it helps to have somebody who's been there. And maybe they didn't go through everything you went through, but they definitely had their own challenges that, as long as you keep an open mind to it, will always be beneficial.
And that actually, thinking back, because I didn't necessarily have a mentor, if I had to go back and redo it again, I think the important thing for somebody coming up through the ranks at this point, and there's no reason not to start tomorrow, regardless of where you're at, is look for people who can be good examples, who have that experience that you want, or who are just a good person, or whatever. And don't be afraid to go approach them. And again, it doesn't have to be any kind of "will you be my mentor" type of thing. It's just hey, would you be willing to sit down and talk with me? I'm going through this program, and I know you've done this or that or whatever. Most people are really, if they're approached correctly, I'll leave that to your interpretation, but if they're approached correctly, are happy to help out, and certainly willing to share 10, 15 minutes or have a cup of coffee with you. And that's the kind of thing that, if they feel you're genuine, you're sincere, that you're actually there to listen versus like, oh, I can now name drop that person as somebody I know. They will open up to you and most likely be available. Like, hey, keep me posted. Let me know what's going on. And those kinds of relationships evolve. But I think I've seen way too many people afraid to go approach, to go after what they want. And it's not a selfish thing. It's, hey, this person who's been through it already, I'd love to learn what they, get their insights, their perspective on what I have to offer. So keep an eye out for that kind of person and just approach them and say, hey.
Okay. I don't want you to keep talking about that because that's my question.
I looked at your notes and
you're starting to answer my question without asking.
He's anticipating.
Right. But of course, that is the next step in this conversation. I do want to point out a couple of things. Number one, throughout history, there have been the story of apprentices, the journeyman, and these titles, all the way to master and so on. So that process has existed. It has changed in the ways it.
Well, I think the other interesting thing is that the appreciation of craftsmen, of artists, and so on is coming back. So we've gotten away from thank God finally the manufacturing, the industrial world, and people value that. And they want to help out and they want to share and pass on those skills. So I think you're going to see a lot more of it.
It didn't take long either. We just had a little taste of that too much manufactured corporate, and we're like, you know what? We need some originality. Yeah. We need the creativity. Why? Yes. For our souls, for our to be human.
If you've ever driven a Yugo, that's the epitome of just industrial world going to hell. So.
Right, but and I think that. It's changed in the last 20 years because technology.
Yes.
I know that when I started my career 20 years ago in the 90s, all we had was the yellow pages. Yeah. And if you wanted to know anything about graphic design, you had to hit up graphic design houses. And they were moving into computers, so they were still doing everything with the X-Acto knife and markers and so on. And they weren't ready to just give out information. They weren't going to answer your questions just because you called or because you showed up at their door. There was some real strict industries and information and secrets, and you had to go through school to SCAD and all this other to learn those talents. So it's changing a lot, and I think the internet has really made everything accessible, at least for you to find someone, which is going to move on to my next question. What should we look for in a mentor, and where do we find them? And I know that you've been to school, so you find them there. You've been in business, so you found people you talked to. You were at a job, and you came out of college, and you found them. But where do you think? What do you suggest we look for them, for those artists who are looking for, and what should they look for? What are the qualities that they're looking for in a mentor? Go for it.
Can I answer that? Well, for me personally, I think a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be in your same lane. It doesn't have to be another artist. It can be anyone that you look up to and you see as successful, no matter what area of business or industry that they're in. That person always has some good advice, can always give you something good to learn from, and you can take that advice and apply it to what you're trying to do in your art career and in your art business. As far as finding these people, just approach people. I found that a lot of the artists here in Atlanta, I would say for the most part, that a lot of them are very, very approachable. I mean, I've never seen anyone in person turn down someone who had a question, for a particular artist or anything like that. On the other hand, mentioning the information age and the internet, for me personally, I have mentors who I, sit down and talk to. I consider Dan a mentor of mine. I also have what I would call virtual mentors, people that I follow online, other artists that I follow online, and I see how they handle their craft, their business, the moves that they're making in an art industry, and I take note, and I try to follow and use what they do, and I try to apply it to my own career. So I think it just depends on, you can find them anywhere. I mean, there's people around you every day, no matter where you are.
It could be low stress.
It could be low stress.
It should be, definitely.
Hopefully, yeah.
It should be. There are mentors all around. No matter where you just have to look and know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything you said there. And going off what you said about accessibility, Atlanta, I feel, is one of the... I mean, I haven't been everywhere, so I don't know. But I think it's a great place to find mentors right now. And to find... and it's kind of easier, like... I visited New York City recently and spending time there. God, I wouldn't want to have to start there. Like, it's a scary thing. Here, you can go to gallery openings. You can go to museum exhibits. You can go to these things that... go ahead.
What makes New York so scary?
Well, it's not. Maybe scary is not the right word, but
it is the right
it's
word.
not as
Intimidating.
It's intimidating, but it's not as approachable. It's not as easy. Like, you could walk into some of the Chelsea galleries and try to meet people, but your chances of actually making connections that are going to last there are, I would say, not as good as they are here in Atlanta. I worked at a few galleries here in Atlanta. I go to a lot of openings, a lot of exhibitions and museum shows and things. And pretty much, no matter who it is, if you are confident and you don't look like a total lunatic, they're gonna shake your hand. I mean, for the most part, they're gonna shake your hand. They're gonna meet you. They'll talk to you, and they'll give you a business card, and they'll answer your emails for the most part. And I feel like that's something that Atlanta definitely has. So if you're probably more of an extrovert, you do have a little bit of a one-up on the people who are a little bit timid and afraid to do those things. So definitely going and being seen, and even if you're not always meeting the people and always shaking the right hands, if you go and you're seen, people will recognize you and say, "Hey, I recognize you from somewhere." When you do finally meet them, "Hey, don't I know you?" They're going to think that they know you because they've seen you around, and it's going to be, the relationships happen even without effort after a while, as long as you are an active member of the Atlanta art community. Okay. And then beyond that, with the online accessibility, that's something it's happening so fast, and it's so valuable as an artist. You can get on Facebook and make an artist page for $0. You can go and make an Instagram, a Twitter, all these things, and get followers from all over the country, all over the world that see your work. And you could ask, you could totally get the two sides of the coin, but you can ask questions to these people that appreciate your work or hate your work that you never would have had access to before. And even if it's a 2-minute conversation, the value you could draw out of that could be really good. It could be really helpful. And I mean, that therefore, I feel like it's, for me, at least 50% of my networking, my business is online, and it's an invaluable tool. And I feel like if you're an artist now and you're not doing those things, you're doing yourself an injustice.
I think the Southern hospitality here in Atlanta may have a little to do with it, but also Atlanta was recently voted earlier this year as the #1 place in America for working artists, and I really think that's true.
I agree.
What about bum artists?
Bum artists, not for bums.
Specific areas.
Yeah.
Couple of thoughts. You asked about New York, and it's just different there. I mean, they have a different way, and you have to figure out what's the way to connect, and how do people, how do you approach them? Atlanta, it is very open, and in New York, it's out there. It's just, you've got to kind of observe, how do people connect, and in a lot of cases, you're introduced to somebody by somebody else. That's the way, that you make your inroads. And I wrote down 2 things before, when the question came up. First one is show up. That is a big part of, even in Atlanta. If you show up repeatedly and people have seen your face around, whether they've talked to you or not, then it's easier for them to say, "Oh yeah, this is a person who obviously is interested, who's committed, who's making things happen." So that, and I think that